That is a long song, dude.
All right. Good morning, everybody from Vietnam. My name is Joshua, and I am here with
And
Sash. How are you doing
what's up?
today, Sash?
I am very good. What about you? This is my first podcast. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, this is both of our first podcasts right here, especially on this channel. So you guys will have to forgive any technical errors we are going to have today. I'm still learning all this right now, but we should be crushing in no time. So today we've
Oh
got
yeah.
one topic of discussion, and we're going to talk about how Donald Trump lost my vote in 2020. You can see here I am wearing my authentic Make America Great Again hat. Yep, this is actually from the U.S. Someone hand carried it over to Vietnam for me. So go ahead and fill your cup with whatever bitter brew you're drinking, guys, because we've got a lot to talk about today. So, Sash, first I want to begin this off with you giving an
Wait for
introduction, and
okay.
why don't you tell me where you stand politically and what you think about Bo Biden and Donald Trump?
Okay. Hey, first of all, you should put the communist pin on that hat. Or
we'll
where's
we'll
your
we'll
communist
save
pin?
that for the election night. So
All right.
we'll keep that one going. But
All right.
tell me, Sash, where do you stand politically? Did you watch the first presidential debate?
I watched bits and pieces. There's no way I was going to watch the entire thing.
Oh, you didn't think it was entertaining enough for you, even with all that shouting. There were three parties in it, if you count Mike Wallace. So,
Yeah.
do you think that it swayed any voters? Do you think anyone decided who they were voting on that day?
No, I think what it did is that I think many people are not going to vote because of that. That first debate was a shit show, a
Oh,
complete shit show, man.
you think it might have actually dissuaded potential voters from casting their vote at all? I see. I see.
Yes,
That
yes.
definitely could have been likely. So, what about yourself? Where do you stand? Are you going to be casting an absentee ballot from Vietnam?
Nope.
This is your first election in Vietnam, is that correct?
Yes, this is
Oh,
my first one in Vietnam. I was here for the midterms 2 years ago, so
oh, okay,
yeah.
gotcha. So, did you vote in 2016? Were you living in the U.S. at the time?
Yes, I was. I did vote for Trump, but no more.
Yeah,
No more voting for me.
that's the
Yeah.
same as me. I actually filed the absentee ballot. I did a mail in from Vietnam, but my home state is Maryland, so you could argue how effective it is. So today we're going to be talking specifically about why I won't be going through that trouble today and why I no longer have the respect that I once did for President Trump. And that is going to be an interesting one. So with that, we're going to get right to it, and we're going to move over to a quote I have here from a article called "I Bet You Thought," which is by David Freeman, who's the Federal Reserve, works for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and he talks about
Okay.
how commercial banks create checkbook money whenever they grant a loan simply by adding new deposit dollars in account on their books in exchange for a borrower's IOU. Have you ever heard the term checkbook money before, Sash?
Nope.
All right. So another way to say this is bank credit. And anyone listening out there, after the show in the descriptions, I'll make sure that I put all my sources and all my links in there. But while you're watching the slideshow, you can also see that I do have the links written down there if you want to try to type fast. But don't worry, I'll be putting them all up eventually. So checkbook money is kind of like fake money, and I'm gonna explain how this goes real quick. So if you can see my screen, I know the people at home can. We've got this guy here, and he's looking at this bank over there,
Yes, I see it. Yeah.
and then there's the Fed off all the way to the left. So yeah, if you're keeping up on the YouTube channel, Sash, just a heads up, probably like a 4 or 5 second delay, but the slideshow is not that animated, so it
Yeah. No
shouldn't cause
worries.
us issues. So let's say this guy wants to start a new business, so he wants a $1 million loan, and he needs to go to his bank to facilitate that, whether it's Capital One, whether it's Bank of America, all these things kind of operate the same. So he needs to go and he needs to apply. And what the bank is required to do before they give him that money, because like we just read before, it's not real money, it's checkbook money or bank credit, is they need to get permission from the Federal Reserve. So the way that it was once upon a time is that you need to put about 3% down with the Federal Reserve, and then the Federal Reserve would allow you to basically create that money. So they would put $30,000 cash in their bank account with the Federal Reserve, and then they would be allowed to change the numbers in this guy's bank account so that it reads $1 million, and he gets his loan as simple as that. So they're going to give the
Oh
approval
wow.
once they get that 30,000, and then they're going to issue him $1 million. They won't give him cash, right? You never actually get cash when you get a loan. Your bank account just goes up, or you get a line of credit, depending on how you're doing it. And you could go to the bank and tell them to turn that bank credit into cash. But if you ask for the whole million, you know that's going to be hard. Just common sense tells you that a bank is not going to want to give you $1 million cash to walk out of there. But they'll let you use credit cards or
Yes.
other cards. They'll let you do transfers. Exactly, exactly. So that's the way it works. And that $1 million, when it first gets issued, is just their numbers in a database, their numbers on a computer screen. They're not even digital currency. They're at a lower standard than digital currency. They're checkbook money or bank credit. So let's
Okay.
go. Let's go more to our personal lives. Like, not many of us have taken out a $1 million loan before, but a lot of us have deposited
Uh,
money in our banks. So let's say we've got Joe Schmo over here who's working hard. He makes his hundred
yeah. If
thousand.
only yeah. If only we had a dad who could give us a small loan of $1 million, huh?
Yeah, sure. Maybe we'd all be as successful as Trump and be the president of the United States already. I'm sure that it
Yeah.
helped that his uncle got all of Tesla's secret writings when he died. I bet you there's a secret or two
Yeah.
that's worth knowing in those. So if you get your $100 and you're going to go to a bank and you're going to go deposit it, what the bank's going to do is they're going to leave about 10% of actual money in their accounts that is yours, and then that other 90% they're essentially going to either give to the Fed to get permission to give bigger loans, or if small loans come through, they'll directly loan that out. But in all honesty, that doesn't even happen anymore. Now they just pretty much issue bank credit only, and then that $90, that 90% of your money right there is just now bank credit. The bank has far more bank credit than dollars, and they're hoping to absorb this later on. So you've ever heard of the phrase "a run on the banks" before?
Yes.
Are you familiar with what that is?
Basically, they don't have deposits when people want to cash out.
Exactly. We've seen it happen in Greece because pretty much every country does something similar to the way I'm describing right here. But we'll talk about some major differences with the United States and with the other countries, because the other countries do have some grounding. There is some centralized currency, unlike the United States. Once upon a time, we all traded with gold and silver, and that was our grounding. But nowadays, thanks to the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, that central currency in other countries is the United States dollar, which means we don't have one.
Okay.
So even though Joe Schmo only has $10 in his account and 90 bank credits in his account, when he goes onto his website and he checks his online banking, it just says $100. It keeps him nice and happy. He doesn't know the difference. But like you said before, if every single Joe Schmo in the world went to the banks and asked for their money back, the banks would have absolutely no way at all to pay it back. There's probably about 15 to 20 trillion US dollars in credit inside the United States, but there's probably only about 1.5 to $2 trillion of hard physical money. So you can see
Okay.
you can see how this just multiplies, right? When a company needs to go to pay their payroll, they're going to take a loan out from the bank, who's going to get permission from the Fed to create this bank credit. They're going to put 3% down, and then all these guys are going to get paid, and then all these guys are going to go back to the bank, pretty much the same bank usually. Look how often companies pretty much encourage you, use our bank or the banking will be so slow. Make sure our direct deposit works. Use the same bank as we do. So all these guys gather all that bank credit that they were just issued. They go put it in their bank. And then what does the bank
Oh.
do with that bank credit but loan 90% out again and again and again and again? And whoever that they pay with this, if they go buy a boat with their credit card, which is pure bank credit, somebody receives that money from the bank, and then they're going to put it in their bank. And then 90% of the money that they just got that was all bank credit for their boat gets loaned out in this never-ending cycle. It's the reason we're in such cancer that we are today.
Okay.
And when you look at countries like I've got Philippines here on the right and Vietnam here on the left, let's say a company in Vietnam wants to
S-
buy something from the Philippines. The Filipinos
Slow
use,
down, dude.
oh, sure.
Dude, slow down. The stream is starting to get really slow.
All right. If I'm,
Like I think it's
all right.
20, like I still see the Fed thing. Okay, now I see Philippines and Vietnam.
All right. So yeah, we've got a bit of a delay. I know you're watching on the stream, so I'll try to compensate for that. I apologize. So the currency should
No worries, no worries.
pop up soon. On the right hand side, the
Yeah, yeah,
Philippines uses
yes,
pesos,
dong.
and as you know, because you're
Left they
here in
use
Vietnam
dongs.
with me, here in Vietnam we use dong.
Yes.
So if the Vietnamese buy a lot of rice from the Philippines, except for 2020 when that switched. So I'll use that example. Right now, the Philippines wants tons of rice from Vietnam because we had next to no economic shutdown from the beer virus, but the Philippines were absolutely hit hard. So what happens? The Filipinos can't pay with pesos because the Vietnamese don't want pesos. They're not interested. So, what medium of exchange do they use for international trade?
Rice.
They want the rice, right? Like, so Vietnam is selling the rice, but they're not going to sell it for pesos. They want to sell it for those $100
Oh,
bills.
U.S. dollars, right? Yeah, yeah.
That's exactly right. Hold on, let me fix my. There we go. That's exactly right. They want to sell it with U.S. dollars because every single country right now is required by the International Monetary Foundation or the IMF to keep a certain amount of U.S. currency in there. There's also the fact that Americans make fantastic products of pretty much everything. So if you have dollars, you can always turn it into goods because America has everything. You want steel, you can buy steel from America with dollars. You want corn, you can buy corn from America with dollars. You want avocados, we were talking about that last night. You can buy avocados from America with US dollars, cars, TVs, everything we make. So there's really no limiting factor. Whereas you look at if you have 10 billion
Yo,
dong in your account, you can only buy
yo.
things that Vietnam has. Go ahead, Sash.
I think something's up with your internet, or it might be mine.
I think it's
It's mine.
yours.
It's mine.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
My
So
internet connection is not. Yeah, it's not stable.
no worries. We'll just keep on trucking.
Yeah.
So here is the number one problem that I've got, and here's the single most reason that I've taken off my trunk hat and don't wear it around so much evermore is now the reserve requirements for these banks when they want to basically create currency. And now keep in mind, I'm not talking about actual US dollars. I'm talking about bank credits that pretend to be US dollars. And like I said, once upon a
Okay.
time, you needed to pay the Fed about 3% to be allowed to create this bank credit. But ever since
Okay.
COVID, that's changed here. And here I've got from the Federal Reserve.gov monetary policy slash reserve fact. You can see here pretty clearly that all the way up to over
Zero.
$127 million. That's right. You could walk into Capital One or Bank of America, take out a $250 million loan right now, and they would not have to have a single penny to back it up. They could just put 150 million in your bank account just by typing. It's not technically creating currency, but you can go use it like currency.
Exactly.
So
And no
before
one's going to know the difference.
Yeah, it's not a functional difference, at least not unless your bank fails. That's exactly right. And we know that our banks are
Fair.
FDIC insured, but that only goes up to $100,000. So there, where you're talking
No,
about,
isn't it 250,000?
it might have been raised. It probably was. I haven't checked that fact recently. When I was a kid taking government class, it was 100,000. Um,
Okay.
So if the interesting thing here is if you look at the top one that says 0 to 16.9 million, the effective date is actually before the beer bug started getting super serious all over the world. So there always has been at the low end a way to create bank credit for free. And if you look past the past 20 years of history, that number has just been eeping up from 5 million to 10 million to 13 million to 14 million. And now we were at 17 million January of 2020, but then the beer bug came and they just erased this slate clean. And you can see that it happened March 26 or 326, right? Completely changed everything. Now you could go take a $500 million loan out and your bank needs absolutely zero financial backing.
Jesus.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that you and I are here in Vietnam, especially while I'm talking about this. I'm going to be talking about a guy named Henry Kissinger, who I assume you know, but
Oh,
you know him?
yeah.
Okay.
He's the guy that basically masterminded the Vietnam War, right?
Oh, you're right on the money. Actually, I was gonna talk about that. He's done a lot more evil things than the Vietnam War, but that is a big part, and that's why I'm tying it in. So he's got this quote. And you and I were talking about terrorism maybe like a week ago. Like, what does it really mean? Are some of these rioters or some of these militias terrorists? And here's how Henry Kissinger defined it. He said, "What we in America call terrorists are really groups of people that just reject the international system." And that's a pretty terrifying thought. And like you accurately said, he was the mastermind behind pushing us into the Vietnam War. The real reason for the Vietnam War had nothing to do with communism and everything to do with the fact that Vietnam was trying to reject using the US dollar as a reserve currency. And the IMF said, "Oh, no, you don't."
Okay.
So if you don't follow
Okay.
along with our banking protocols, we bomb you into oblivion. And that's the end of it. We've
Yeah.
been doing this for a very long time. We've run the world's banking since 1946 when something started called the Bretton Woods era. And then we'll talk a little bit
Okay.
later. I know you already are familiar with Nixon taking us off the gold standard, but we'll get to that.
Yes.
So here we go. These are the reserve balances that all banks needed to have with the Federal Reserve. This is how much money they needed to keep in the Federal Reserve to prove that they were a bank in good operating status. And I'm sure your YouTube's about to catch up, but the audience is listening to it at the same time I am. So they can see that it's gone from August in 2019, where they needed to have $134 billion on hand just to operate and be in good standing for that FDIC insurance. And then April of 2020 comes, and they don't need a dime.
Jesus Christ.
It gets worse. We were talking
Oh.
before about the run on the banks and how much money a bank actually is required to have inside their vaults. Now, this might not mean your local branch has this much, but it does mean the headquarters of that bank once upon a time was required to have 50 to 100 billion dollars in their system. Oh, sorry, in cash, right? They had to physically have this, or they had to have it in other M2 assets. And now, once again, we see April 2020 runs around. How ironic that it's 420. This is all going down. That's not really an occult number, but it's a fun one.
420, that's the day oil prices went negative, right?
Everything is happening at the same time in this April. You're exactly right. I wasn't specifically talking about the 20th of April because I don't recollect the exact day. I was more talking the year. It was 2020 and it was April. So but
Yeah.
you can see starting in April, the banks literally, and this is every bank in the United States to the listeners out there, every single one of them, they are no longer required to have any money in their vault whatsoever. And excuse me, I'm saying money. Mike Maloney would rebuke me. It should be currency because money and currency are not the same thing. And if we have enough time on our podcast, we'll talk about that today. So zero US dollars inside major banks now.
That's fucking retarded. Oh my
Yeah, and you
god.
might say, but Joshua, like it's not like just because they don't have to keep the money there doesn't mean they're not going to keep the money there anymore. So like let's check that out. Let's take a look at our interest rates on excess reserves that was paid out by the Federal Reserve. And we can see perfectly coinciding with those passing, all interest ceased. This isn't because the interest rate totally dropped, it's because there's no money left.
Yeah.
And I know
Jesus.
you were talking about specifically with me about, is Trump manipulating the markets, right? Like, how is it that we're going through this recession, soon to be depression, of such mass proportions, but the Dow Jones index and the S&P 500 keep on climbing? Like,
It
how?
keeps rising. It
Yeah.
keeps rising, man.
So let's take a look at how many assets the federal government owns. And then I wonder who's buying all those stocks to keep their prices from deflating. You can see here that in 2008, Obama did very much the same thing. He asked for emergency permission to purchase securities so that he would be able to artificially keep the stock market high, right? He didn't want to create a panic. We know what happened in 1929. And we won't have time to talk about why that happened, but for similar reasons to what's going on now. And you can see that spike in total assets that were owned by the,
Yeah, right there. Yeah,
yep, right there. But then look over here at Corona, and I've been
it
trying to avoid
spiked
saying
way
that word,
more.
but there it is, exactly right. Like, way, way, way more. And so that brings us into another subject that I want to talk about what's the end game, what's going to happen. And when we
Hmm.
look at these numbers, these are real laws that had to pass, guys. These are executive orders and laws that have changed all this. And there even was a New York Times article that dubbed Donald Trump the brand new chairman of the Fed. You remember that one coming out, what, 4 months
Yeah,
ago?
I remember that one.
Exactly right. So that came out. So all this I see as leaning into the destruction, really. It's absolutely targeted towards a destruction of the US dollar, and there's not much that we can do to avoid this. These numbers only rise so far, and we're going to keep going, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But first, I want to jump into the difference between money and currency. And that's the reason I have this chart up. This is a really normal economics professor question. Which one of these things is not like the other? What would be your answer, Seth?
Oh, the gold.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Though technically, when you ask most adults, we're already very much talking about the economy, so you're in the right mindset to be thinking. But if you just start randomly asking adults that you know these three questions, now Vietnamese might be a little different. They're a little bit smarter about this kind of thing, but start asking American adults, and you will see that they're going to go, the monopoly money, the monopoly money, the monopoly money. Or they will
Yeah.
say the $100 bill, because that's the only one that's real money.
No.
So I'd like to quote J.P. Morgan. I know we've all heard of him, and this is a congressional testimony he gave in 1912. Ironically, the year before the Federal Reserve was created. It was created December 23rd, 1913. Gold is money, and everything else is just credit with extra steps. All right, I added the Rick and Morty part.
uh,
So money and currency are pretty similar,
nice.
but they're different in one way. Money is absolutely one of the best inventions that humankind has ever
Money
made.
and currency. What?
What's the difference?
Sorry,
Oh, sorry, I'm breaking up.
my connection is unstable.
No worries, no
Can you
worries.
repeat that? Can you
Yeah,
repeat
so
that?
money and currency is probably one of the most amazing tools that mankind has ever made. The only one that I can think would be comparable probably would be arithmetic. It's so incredibly useful.
Okay.
The most valuable thing, your real wealth, is your time and your freedom, right? We're Americans. We know that. Everyone understands that the time is money, essentially. It's actually kind of backwards. Money is a tool that we trade for that time. It's like a container,
Okay.
it's like a box, so that when we exert economic energy, when we do something productive with our time, we need a way to not let it slip through our fingers. Like a jug holds water for later, or a bottle can seal it. Money can seal that economic energy that we've spent, and keep it contained until we want to use that economic energy for something for our own benefit. And we look at gold and silver, and they began to be traded not quite as a currency, but pretty close to a currency 5,000 years ago. So what is a currency? A currency, we know it's a medium of exchange. It needs to be a unit of account. You have to be able to count it. It needs to be portable, right? Like once upon a time, there were thoughts that oil could be the next money. Like in 2003, they were talking about
Sorry,
creating.
sorry, dude. The stream is lagging.
Oh, no
Sorry.
worries.
Can you repeat that? Repeat that.
Sure. I'm also reading just about everything on my slides. So if it's taking a while, you can just listen as well. Um, so it needs to be. I'll throw everything up here so that they'll catch up as soon as possible. It needs to be portable. Oil now they're at record low prices, but in 2003, 2004, especially with the dollar and the petrodollar being so closely bound, there was this idea that oil is inherently useful. We need it for everything. Maybe this could be a type of currency for us, but oil is not portable, so it doesn't work. That's why gold and silver work quite well. It needs to be durable. Um, here in Vietnam, they make the money out of plastic. In the U.S., we use like this weird paperish cloth thing that keeps it lasting. But then let's take a look at those Egyptians 5,000 years ago who were using gold and silver that's still valid, right? It needs to be divisible. I need to be able to give you 20,000 dong, and you need to be able to break a 10,000 dong back to me, right? Just like you need to be able to
Yeah.
make change. And then the most important part for currency is fungibility. And that means that your dollar and my dollar are worth the same, even though they're different.
Okay, okay.
And we see that with gold, right? Especially here, because Sasha and I live in Vietnam. Gold's pretty prevalent as both money and a currency here. So you can buy land with gold in Vietnam. That's completely legal. The only currencies you're allowed to use contracts in Vietnam are Vietnamese dong and gold. So the main
Why
thing that
not? Wait, why not U.S. dollars?
you can do business contracts, but you can't purchase land for U.S. dollars in Vietnam. I'm not entirely sure why the government has that as their monetary. Oh, I am sure. Never mind. That policy was put in place before Vietnam entered into the IMF. So during the late 70s, after the war was ended, and the early 80s, before Vietnam was opened up to trade, they won the war, right? Like, I hate to break it to any Americans listening, Vietnam won the war, and they did not have to keep the U.S. dollar in their central reserve currency banks. So we use this thing called a SWIFT code. You've probably heard of them if you've ever done an international bank transfer. You need to know that international SWIFT code. So this is basically how the U.S. bullies every other country in the world, like Iran and Cuba, North Korea, things like this. If you don't adhere to our policies before we go to bombs, we make it so you can't internationally transfer currency. That's it. We block you from the SWIFT system. It's kind of messed up.
And the U.S. is in complete control of that.
I would say we're at around 80%. The IMF does have some say, but the IMF seems to be controlled by, if not the United States government, at least the government that's controlling the United States. You guys know the six-pointed star I'm talking about. So the main difference
Jesus.
would be the
Yeah.
store of value over time. Money stores value over time, and currency doesn't necessarily. And I think it's pretty clear that we've seen the US dollar is failing at that, and I'm going to illustrate more pretty soon that it will fail even more dramatically. First, I want to go back and take a look at the history. We're going to do this super quick. Gold and silver has been the predominant medium of exchange pretty much as long as humans have been humaning. And that same gold that's 5,000 years old can be still used and smelted today. Even if it's ugly, you can shine it up and make it pretty. Gold and silver can be broken and then re-added together if you have enough skill, and you can do this with almost next to no loss. Especially now, our furnaces are so good, so it's got real divisibility. If I have a kilogram of silver, I can break it up into two 500-gram blocks, and if I have 10 100-gram blocks of silver, I can put them in a furnace and make myself a kilo block. 680, 630 BC, real money started to exist. So this would be like minting of coins. That's what adds that fungibility. Because if you go back to Egypt, even though they were swapping with gold, it was like, yo, check out my gold necklace. Can I get that camel from you? And so it still was a barter society, but there was just an inherent value in the bartering of gold and silver, so everyone knew it. But there wasn't really easy ways to check purity. There were, it's not true. They were pretty smart. They could put it in water and see the volume and the weight. So there were ways to check purity, but it wasn't quick. You had to get there and do math. It's not like walking up to a stall where I hold this and the seller knows it's 30,000 dong, knows how much that's worth, right? She has to evaluate every single piece of gold and silver to see what it's valuable. So in Lydia, they started minting these coins so that the government would attest what purity they were and what weight they were. And then prices started to exist for the very first time in human history because there was fungibility to the money. And prices are important. Like we live in Vietnam, so Sash, I'm sure sometimes you've been up to a place that has no marked price. And what's the first thing that goes through your
Yeah,
head when you walk into a Vietnamese stall and nothing has a marked
Panuting,
price? Yeah, okay, so you'll ask them,
Panuting.
but realistically, if you see two stalls in front of you and one has all their prices written down and one has no price written down, which one are you going to more likely go to?
The one with the prices,
Yeah, why is that?
because the one without the price are more likely to get ripped off on.
Yeah, exactly right. We're Americans, guys, and you know, because many of my listeners are Americans. We're not good at the whole barter society thing, right? Like we're not used to having to haggle with a price every time we want to buy something. We want to walk into a store, say how much it is, get the real price, pay the real price, and leave. But the Vietnamese, they're not so much like that. They love the arguing over price. And they'll sit there and they'll argue about 7 cents just because that's what they do, right? Like I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then
I've
they'll
seen it. You go to Hentan Market. Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly right. And then there'll be like this there's a certain way that a certain ritual that they need to discuss the pricing so that nobody's embarrassed and nobody loses face and everybody's happy with their price. But at least for me and many other foreigners that I've met here, it's a frustrating, tedious process. Would you agree?
Yes. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, and I mean, my Vietnamese friends make fun of me often because how often I use the online shopping site Lazada because prices are just there. Like I just order it online, and then the delivery guy
Yeah.
shows up, and I pay the delivery guy exactly what the website says. You're breaking up, Sash. I think you're back now. Say that point again for me.
What was I saying? Shit.
I was talking about Lazada.
What were okay? Oh, fucking connection. So you were saying it's yeah. The thing with Lazada, it's more a convenience.
Yes, I never get frustrated. I
Like
never get stressed.
Shopee, Tiki, no.
Yep.
But
All
the
the
only
same thing. Go
problem
ahead.
with the only issue with Lazada is that there's way too much fake shit. Like I bought a Mac charger 1 year ago, and it was fake, and it actually fucked up my computer.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. Especially something with Macs because they're like even the iPhone doesn't it let you know when you plug it into a non-iPhone charger and it's like, hey, we're watching you.
Um, Not with the phones, but with the Macs, you can tell by the heat.
Ah, I see. I've seen the message on some of my friends' phones, so I know there's some warning, but they do charge. I tend to only buy things on Lazada that are advertised as fake when it comes to that because you get a really great deal and you know it's a knockoff product. But you're right. If I needed like a
Yeah,
quality name brand, Samsung or Apple, I would need to go to a brick and mortar store.
yeah,
So
exactly.
once the money came, going a little bit back to economic history, once the money came taxes. And Athens was the first society to establish taxes and allow their people to trade freely, right? And it was such a phenomenal success and it built Western academia. I know that the Chinese had academia long before us, and now here we are,
What?
2,500 years
The,
later.
the way
Go ahead.
the Chinese what?
Had
The
academia. The
Chinese
first
had what?
school was in China. It wasn't in Greece like we're told in school.
Man, God
Confucius
damn it.
created his school and had scholars before Plato did. So a lot of the
Internet, dude. I'm sorry.
oh, no worries, no worries. I'm also talking to the listeners out there. Um, yeah, like I was saying, the Confucius started his school before Plato, so the education is a little bit older than Athens. But here we are, 2,500 years later,
Okay, okay.
and we're still in awe at the things they built. Like, I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the ruins in Athens, right? Like the public works that they did. We still study the wars that they fought. I'm sure you've seen 300, right?
Yeah.
So how did they fall? They were such a if they were such a beautiful society, how did they fall?
Inflation.
Inflation. That's exactly right. Too much greed
They
and too
mixed
much war.
copper with gold.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. You are right on the money. So we've only got 20 minutes left of our podcast, so I'm gonna skip talking about the war, but pretty much Sash nailed it 100%. It's the wartime dilemma, right? The rich citizens are paying the taxes, and then the Athenians need to build ships. They need to pay military. They need to do public works. Athens never stopped building like temples and schools and meeting places. They never, or roads, like they never stopped doing these public works, even in the height of their battles, and they just didn't have the money for it all. They kept feeding the poor, which is a wonderful thing to do if you have the means, but if you don't have the means, the Temple of Nike was literally built in a respite of two battles that's making the Athenian government go absolutely and completely broke. So if they get 1,000 gold pieces in and they need to spend 10,000 gold pieces, you've already answered the question. What do?
You inflate it.
Yep, they start mixing copper in with the gold. And there's a really there's a saying in one of Plato's books. I can't remember what it is right now, where he's talking about the value of humans, and he's comparing humans to coins because he's seeing just a downgrade of the quality of Athenians. And he's like, the old coins that we have, that once you find one, you never spend, and you just kind of push it away. I think it's called Grisham's law, but I'm not sure. But there is a law that humans inherently collect that which is more rare. So like
Okay.
it's why we don't spend $2 bills in the United States anymore for some strange reason. It's not worth more, but it is more rare. It's why we stopped spending the half dollars. It's why the U.S. government tried to make a gold Sacagawea dollar, which is like the same as the €1 coin or the loonie in Canada. But Americans never spent them. They would get them and they'd just keep them, and they'd never spend all these. So all these trials of trying to switch our paper money to coins kept failing in America. And the same things happened in Athens, where anytime they would get an old coin that was pure gold, they would never spend it. They would save it and keep it. And they would quickly spend all the cheap copper mixed coins. And then the humans just inherently knew. We know that gold is valuable, and we could tell these new coins weren't right. And so Plato in his book was comparing the old Athenians who had real education to these new people who killed Socrates in the end. And so I'm gonna skip this because we're already kind of running out of time, and I've been talking the whole time. But you're right on the money. If the bills are too high, what do? The Athenian government began to mix gold coins and copper. And then at first, like, the prices were the same because the Athenian government was pretending they weren't doing this. But then people stopped spending the gold
Okay.
coins. And then the gold coins actually had a price. And for the first time in human history, there was a price for gold. Now we know the price of gold, right? When we drive by District 5 here in Saigon, we see gold price, gold price, gold price, gold price, gold price. The Vietnamese love their gold, guys. More power to them. They're very, very smart people. They know what's coming, and they're preparing for it. So eventually the Athenians just not printed, but minted their government into oblivion. The prices rose so fast that there was no longer any stability. They couldn't pay their shipbuilders to maintain their navy. They couldn't pay their military to maintain their city. They couldn't pay their masons to maintain their walls. And then in 404 BC, the Athenians surrendered to Sparta and fell to they felt they were once the most powerful city in all of Western civilization, and then they just became a pale, decrepit satellite of Rome. We're going to move through this one fast, too. So this is the Weimar Republic in Germany. In 1873, Germany creates the mark, and we call it the gold mark now, but it was just called the mark then. It was as simple as 2000.
That was the first Reich, right?
I suppose it would be. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you. I've only when I've read about Reichs, I've only specifically read about the Third Reich. It makes sense.
Yeah,
it would be the right time.
Yeah.
So the Second Reich, would that be World War One?
The Second Reich was like, it was only like 200 years, I think. I'm not sure, but it went away after they got blamed for World War One.
Oh, okay. Then this would be if you're saying the Second Reich lasted 200 years, this would be the Second Reich then, because this gold mark started in 1873.
Okay.
All right. So.
Okay, yeah. That would be Second Reich. Yes.
Okay. So then, cool. Glad we got that clarification. So, in 1873, Germany creates the mark, but it was bound statically to gold. 2,790 marks was 1 kilogram. So. The Vietnamese measurement for gold is a lung, and I put that in reference for I've reused some of the slideshow. Here is what the mark looked like today. A lung of gold, just so everyone out there, it's 56 million Vietnamese dong. That's about 2.5 grand. A lung is a little bit more than an ounce. In 1914, World War I starts, and Germany removes the mark from the gold standard. Then 1914 on, if you're talking to a historian, we then call it the paper mark.
Okay.
So from 1914 to 1918, the amount of marks that existed inside Germany multiplied by 4. Okay. But prices did not raise. Bread was about a quarter of
prices did not raise?
Did not raise. We'll talk about why in a second, but that's exactly right. During World War I, the economy was relatively stable. Prices didn't raise, and bread was consistently about a quarter of a mark, and a lung of gold was about 125 marks. So now we're going to talk about why. The reason prices didn't raise is because there's two factors in an economy. It's not just how much money is there, but it's also how quickly that money gets spent. How fast does the money move? Yeah. If you and I each have $10 and you want something of mine and I want something of yours, we pay each other $10, we go home, we each have $10. Our GDP between us was $20. Now, if you have 20 things I want and I have 20 things you want, and we each have $10 and everything we want is $10, we could do that transaction 20 times in a day. Right? And yeah. Our GDP has gone from $20 to $100. Just like that, only based on velocity. There's still only $20 in our economy.
Just velocity.
Just velocity, right?
Just by velocity.
Yep. There's still only $20 in our economy between me and you. So I want to look at the money stock. This is M2 money for the super financial geeks out there. M2 money is near money. It means there might be some restrictions on pulling it out. Think like a CD or certificate of deposit. Maybe your bank is going to charge you like 2% if you want to take this money out because you told them they could have it for 2 years. But the point is it's how we count the money. And it is currency, but the U.S. government lies and calls it money. It's how we count the currency in the United States. So you see here that during 2008, you see that little spike. Once again, that's that Great Recession that Obama had. Oops. Let me go back here.
I mean, Bush started it, though, right? Yeah, it was Bush who started it.
It was the housing collapse that really caused it. So I would think that the blame definitely goes with the Bush administration. The Obama administration didn't help us out of it. And if we zoomed in on these charts and completely cut out 2020, we can see measurable improvements that Trump did do to the economy. And very serious. It's not wrong what Trump is saying that he was helping the economy pre-2020. I can find the day he's elected on these charts if I cut out 2020. But once 2020 comes in here, because of the beer bug, everything gets so thrown out of whack that it just doesn't matter anymore. So we see in 2008 our monetary volume going up. We see in 2020 our monetary volume skyrocketing, just like Weimar Germany. 4 times it happened during World War II. This is like just 6 months and we're skyrocketing. Trump's already talking about another bill, right? Another stimulus bill. So, like I said, in the monetary velocity, currency times velocity equals the inertia of the currency or your GDP. So if you've got 4 guys and every
Okay.
dollar moves once, I know you're a little bit behind, but this is all animated. You'll see it in a second.
Yeah,
Whereas
I'll
if
see
you've
in a
got 4
second.
guys who spend it 4 times, then your GDP gets to 16.
Oh wow. Okay, okay. I see. I see.
Right. So while the currency supply went up 4 times in Germany, the velocity fell to a quarter because everyone was so terrified about the future because the war was going on that they would basically just hide their marks under their bed and in their pillows and behind their mirrors. Everyone was hiding and they were saving as much as they can. They didn't trust the banks, but the people were artificially taking currency out of circulation to save it. So the economy felt like it was stable. Prices didn't rise because
Okay.
the currency wasn't moving. This created a shield. It was temporary, but it created a shield against inflation. And it's why all through World War I, we don't see an inflation of the Weimar paper mark. So to give an example, if there were 10 billion marks in 1914 and the average German spent 4 marks per day, then in 1918 there were 40 billion marks in the economy, but the average German only spent 1 mark per day. So at the end of the day, the economy has the same inertia. The GDP is the same.
Okay.
Now let's take
Okay.
a look at our monetary velocity inside the United States ever since that event happened in New York 20 years ago. So once again, if we look at Obama, if we look at Obama's Great Recession, which I'm not pinning this on Obama. The whole point of this podcast of why I'm not voting for Trump is that all these politicians are the same, right? So you're
Yes.
apt in saying that what happened with the housing market fiasco absolutely influenced the 2008 downturn, and you can see
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Americans got scared and we stopped spending. And then
Yes.
Obama gets us to a little recovery, but then 2011 hits in and Obama has another rough time of it. And here's a pretty clear indicator that Obama wasn't pulling us out of a recovery. But you see Trump comes in and you see this little tiny peak up.
Yeah. Bump.
Yep.
A little pump up. Yeah.
Like I said, if you cut off 2020, you can make a great case that Donald Trump was a fantastic economic president. But then 2020. And now look at our velocity.
Up,
Terrifying.
down, up, down.
Up, down,
Yeah.
up, down. Yeah, up, down until 2020 and then gow. So the German people started to spend faster. The German government had a bunch of debt to pay off. I can't remember the name, but they were owed reparations for all the World War I stuff they did. There was a certain name, and so they brilliantly negotiated the agreement so that they only had to pay in marks. They didn't have to pay in gold. So then the government just fired up every single printer they had and just started printing like crazy. So I know you're behind on the slideshow, but I'll just read these aloud. In 1918, bread cost a quarter of a mark. In 1922, bread cost 3 marks. In January of 1923, bread cost 700 marks. In May,
7.
12.
Oh.
Yeah, in May, 1,200 marks. In July, 100,000 marks. In September, 2 million marks. In October, 670 million marks. In November, 80 billion marks.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So we've only got 8 minutes left. So I think I'm going to skip this, but this might interest you. So maybe we'll talk about it a little later. This is how the Vietnamese dong went through a very, very similar inflation. Guys, just so you know, we're all millionaires here in Vietnam.
Yeah,
We all make somewhere between 400,000 to $1 million an hour, depending on what you do. Um,
yeah.
and 2,300,000 dong is 100 US dollars. So the government for the Vietnam was a little bit smarter. They actually mandated the devaluing to keep that run, that circle that happened in the Weimar Germany, where it just kept more and more and more and more and more. The Vietnamese government knew they were printing too much money, but it was the only way they could pay for things, right? Their people were going to
Yeah,
starve
yeah.
if they didn't. So they got rid of smaller currencies and they added zeros, quite literally, to protect the stability of their economy. So the jumps happened one at a time instead of a never ending cycle. The Vietnamese government, from what I'm reading, actually handled this the best that they could have given the situation. And keep in mind, every major power in the world was doing everything they could at this time to destroy them economically. You know that the Federal Reserve is a private company. The owners are totally secret. They create all the U.S. Currency. It's a direct violation of the U.S. Constitution, and nobody gives a damn. Now let's look at the inflation
Nobody
we've.
cares.
Yeah, nobody cares. Let's look at the inflation that we've seen so far. In 1913, 1 ounce of gold, $20. 1946, 1 ounce of gold, $20. That was when the Bretton Woods era began, which ended in 1971. And you can see, since America basically bullied the world into submission during that time, our dollar maintained. Because what was happening is we were printing so much more money from 1946 to 1970, but for the very first time in history, there was a creation of a world currency. So our dollars weren't staying in America. Our dollars were going out to other countries. And we were buying things from China and buying things from France and buying things from Germany, but we were doing it with US dollars. So then the US dollar stayed in those countries. So internally in America, we didn't feel an inflation. And why didn't we feel an inflation? The same thing as Weimar Germany, because our velocity went down because the money wasn't in America. The money was in other countries. Have you been to Cambodia, Sash?
Yeah, I've been to Cambodia.
You know you can practically use dollars there like it's their own currency, right?
Yeah, yeah, you can go everywhere with US
Coffee
dollars
shop,
there.
taxi, bookstore, movies, anywhere. You can go buy a happy pizza with a little bit of the green sprinkled on. Just pay them $20 and you're
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
right? So that was because countries' own economy started to fail and they started to latch on to the U.S. dollar. All this happened. I'm trying to go fast. We only got 5 minutes left. Then the French president, smart guy, realized he's like, wait a second, this is not going to last forever. I'm calling America in. I want the gold. Right at that point, it was already illegal for the average citizen to trade their dollar in for gold because the gold standard was mostly broken. But central banks of other countries were still allowed. That was part of the agreement. It's the only reason that they agreed to this in the beginning. So once the French government started to run on the bank, essentially, but the bank was the United States, Nixon goes, for the order of national security, I am temporarily suspending the convertibility of the U.S. dollar to gold. And that temporary conversion has been 50 years. And now,
50 years, that's a long ass time.
yeah, yep. Keep looking through monetary history, and you'll see these fiat currencies really only have like a 40-year lifespan, and we're already pushing this bad boy. So we saw from 1913 to 1970, gold went from $20 to $35. Now Nixon pulls the plug, and where are we at now? 1980, we're at 600.
13,
Well, we're way more.
600?
Yep. And then
Probably, yeah.
And then in 1999, gold hit this crash. Gold and silver hit this crash. Everyone started to believe in American exceptionalism. A bunch of countries in Africa failed and South America failed, so they started to use U.S. currency. And the United States government started to sell gold and silver privately to try to crash the prices. But once that event in New York happened in 2001, gold prices caught right back up to where they were because people stopped believing in this. And that's why we've seen, even just in this corona time, we've gone from 1,800 to over 2,000 gold. This is a pretty scary thought.
Jesus.
in comparison to everything that's happening. This is from Henry Kissinger again in 1991. Today, America would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow, they will be grateful. This is especially true if they were told that there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead to deliver them from this evil, the beer bug. That one thing every man fears is the unknown. It's why Trump keeps calling it the invisible enemy, right? When presented with this scenario,
Yeah.
individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well being granted to them by the world government. I'll wear the mask. I'll socially distance. I'll stay home. Just protect me.
Yeah.
This is the very first time we started to do this in 1865. And this is talking about what would happen if the United States never had a central bank and if we stuck with the gold currency. And this famous quote from the London Times that says the government must be destroyed or it will destroy every monarchy on the globe. They're talking about the U.S. I've got the Google article there. If you'd like to go read that full thing, for the lack of time, we're gonna have to skip this. Here's my pictures proving just how connected Mr. Harry Kissinger is. Everyone on the planet. There's not a single person he wasn't in bed with.
Hmm.
I know you're a bit behind, but I'm going through pictures. I should say, is that Agnew? I've got that face. I think that's Carter.
Brzezinski, yeah.
Oh, it's Brzezinski. Okay, Reagan, Bush Senior, Merkel, Clinton, and then your face is covering the rest of them for me. Bush Jr.,
Yeah.
Clinton, Hillary, Obama, Donald Trump, President Xi, Vladimir Putin.
Is he dead yet, or is he still alive?
I think he's still kicking it.
Well, let me search that.
This one is
Henry.
This one is
Kissinger.
when Trump was president. So if he died during Trump's presidency.
Yeah, he's still alive, dude. He's 97 years old.
Holy crap, that's some adrenochrome right there. So, in conclusion, I'm finishing this right on time. I'd like to quote William Casey, the CIA director. We'll know that our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. And we're watching a movie, guys. And all you Q-tards, Q keeps telling you. Yeah. What is it that Q keeps telling us, Sash?
You're watching a movie.
Yep. And Trump's the leading actor. And that's how he lost my vote in 2020. This economic stuff shows to me that he is rolling into the turn. He is leaning into the punch. He is accelerating this. So, in clarity, guys, here's really what matters. And I know Sasha and I are in agreement on this because we've talked about it so many times. There's no such thing as white versus black. There's no Chinese versus Vietnamese. There's no Americans versus Russians. There's no Democrats versus Republican. And there's not even Liverpool versus Man U. There's them and there's us.
Versus us.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's my presentation. What'd you think there, Sash?
This was fun, but I've got to be talking more.
Definitely.
So
I knew this was your first one, so I made sure I had enough content to go all the way through.
Yeah.
We're right on the hour, but we can spend 5-10 minutes to recap if you've got thoughts that you want to go over. I definitely want you talking more next time. And we are still
okay, we're still live.
Yep.
All right. So when will the actual event occur, if that makes sense?
Like when is the currency gonna fail? So,
yeah, like when?
So every fiat currency that's ever existed in human history has failed catastrophically at one point. There's been over 10,000. But when do people realize it though? Right. See, that's what we're
Because
waiting
when they
for.
realize it is when it fails.
Yep, when the velocity starts to go back up and people no longer trust the money be sitting in their bank or sitting in their home, and they start to rush to spend the dollar as fast as possible. So we were talking before about how there's about $30 trillion floating out there. A lot of it is in the vaults of national central banks. Like China, I believe, has around
Okay.
$8 trillion. So my guess is a foreign power will ignite the excitement by liquidating their US dollar stock. And so when someone like
Okay.
China starts to sell off or basically just buy product in the US, then then we could see that run that gets so terrified. And I'd like to bring up the Cantillon effect to my Americans who are thinking about this.
Well, what's that?
The Cantillon effect is that when more money or more currency is created, whoever spends it first steals value from whoever spends it last.
Why is that?
Because you can spend it before the inflation that's bound to happen takes effect. That's the main reason. So if they make 10 trillion more dollars and they're about to pump them into the US, and you want to spend every penny you have, because in 2 weeks money's going to be really easy to come by, but right now it still isn't yet because that hasn't hit the whole market. So we all know this website. Oh, it's taking a little
What
bit.
website?
This is taking a little bit longer to
What
load than
website?
I intended. Give me a second. The U.S. debt clock is what I'm about to pull up here, but
Oh shit! Yeah, yeah. We all know that website. We're at what 27 now?
yeah, we're at 2704. And one more thing I want to
Jesus
point
Christ!
out is look at our tax revenue. Our tax revenue is actually dropping.
Wait. Let it come by. Tax revenue. I don't see our
No worries,
revenue.
I'm circling it. You'll see it in a second. And then I'd like to call your attention to things down in the bottom right.
Your face is blocked. Okay.
I removed my face. Um, so this value right here, you see that $29,000 per ounce of gold and that 4,000 per ounce of silver. So what that is that's saying for every 1 ounce of silver that gets mined in 2020 and comes into creation, 4,000 US dollars are created.
Wait, $4,000 are created when what?
For every single ounce of silver mined and purified.
Okay.
10 months
That's
ago, this was $900.
Jesus Christ.
Yep. And it was about $5,000 on the gold, ounce of gold to US dollars. Now silver is nearly matching the price. We are going to see triple digit silver in the near future, my friends. If you'd like to
Fucking
survive this
Jesus.
hurricane, buy silver. All right, Sash, I've said all I've got to say. That's why I'm not voting for Trump, because he's destroying the dollar. He knows it. He's doing it on purpose. He's leaning into the punch, and it's going to be misery for millions of Americans. And if he cared about Americans, he wouldn't be doing that. What are
Well,
your thoughts?
puppet. He's a puppet, man.
It seems so. It's a shame.
Seems so. Yeah, it's quite the shame. It's I think Biden is going to win. That's how these riots stop.
Yeah, I mean it's a weird rock and a hard place. Like what? You vote for Trump, the riots continue. You vote for Biden, it stops. That's the literal definition of terrorism right there.
No, but the thing is though is that the people know it's the Democrats that are doing it, but they'll still vote for Biden to to
Yeah,
make it stop.
they just want to be comfortable again. Do you um
Yeah.
do you think that the election will be fair, or do you think elections are ever fair?
I think the winner has been decided by now. I mean,
Yeah. The old phrase American presidents aren't elected, they're selected.
selected. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. I think that I say that Trump wins on the night of. then maybe in 1 week they magically say it's a Biden. Oh,
Interesting.
who knows? Yeah,
Interesting.
because those mail-in ballots are, I don't trust that shit.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. So, guys, if you're listening, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Good morning from Vietnam. Sash and I will be coming to you live every morning on Monday morning. It's night for us. We started streaming at
Yeah,
six
it's
thirty
seven
p.m.
thirty p.m. here. Yeah,
Yeah, but I think we're gonna, as we get a little bit better at this and the Sash gets more
yeah.
comfortable and gets involved, we're gonna be really great to listen to as you start your day and have a nice cup of coffee. And what one thing Sash and I are really looking forward to. You want to tell them about election night?
Oh, so on the day of the election, we're going to be at our favorite restaurant streaming,
Yeah, we're gonna
and we're
set up.
going to,
Go.
we're gonna be dr- drinking beer while we follow it live.
All night for
So
us. So we're gonna start at like 10 in the morning our time. It'll be the first good morning we wish you that's actually our morning. And we're gonna try to
yeah,
get a bunch of guests. Like I've got some
yeah,
political science teachers I want to invite. Sash, you told me you had a couple interesting people you wanted to invite too. So since we'll be streaming
yeah,
for so
yeah,
long, we want to have a hot mic so that if anyone wants to sit down and say a piece, they can. And
and
I'm
we'll
go ahead.
probably be very drunk too.
By the
We'll
time the
pro-
election is called, if we're not drunk, we're not doing it right.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Shit. Yeah.
And I also plan to have the tech side figured out by then to enable you
Okay.
guys to
Okay.
call in, so that
Yeah.
not only will we have a hot mic live in Vietnam for anyone who wants to come, and if anyone in Vietnam is listening, we will be at Bollywood at 207 Bui Vien, District 1 in Saigon. That's where you can find us starting
Some of
at.
the best food in town.
Oh yeah, some fantastic Indian food and some great prices, great beer. We'll be streaming there, but for those of you in America, you will. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do it yet. Whether it'll be a Zoom meeting or a StreamYard or something, or maybe it'll be just be a U.S. phone number to call in. But we will enable a way so that you can come in and you can say your sense. And I promise you guys, it is going to be the most fun stream on election night. It's gonna be better than
Yes.
anyone's. We're gonna be having a blast no matter what happens, and it's just gonna be smiles and jokes and laughs and happiness, because in this dark world, that's all we freaking got.
Yeah. Hey, hey. With your MAGA hat, put the communist pin
Yeah,
on it.
I certainly shall. I'll be wearing my commie pin. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. I want you to have a wonderful morning, and Sasha and I will see you next.